Good morning, Intenders.
Good morning.
Welcome back to Morning Intentions. Today is Friday, November 21st, and today is not a typical, normal Reflection Friday. We're going to focus on new material. Annette and I were actually taking time off for Thanksgiving.
Yay!
Imagine that.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Normally, we would have pushed through. We would have hustled. We would have hustled for our worth, saying, oh, we got to do all our episodes. Well, we have time. We should just make it happen. We're not going to be working anyway, so we should just make it happen. And this year, we've decided to do things differently. Remember, y'all, if you want to have a different life, you have to do things differently. So we are doing things differently. November of 2025, we'll only have 3 podcasts next week. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and we'll do our reflection for the month on Wednesday. So if you're dying to reflect, just wait a few more days, 5 more days in fact, and we'll be all reflecting together on our whole month of what's your why. I am excited about what's coming up in December. We won't announce it. It'll be a bit of a surprise.
That's going to be an interesting one.
I am so looking forward to that one.
Now, that one was your idea.
Yes.
And I'm not sure exactly how it's going to go, but I'm going to trust.
Yes, you'll have to trust. It builds off of hustle culture. It builds off of what's your why. We're continuing this trend. But that's next month, and that's also next week. For today, though, Annette, after we finished recording yesterday's episode, you said to me, wow, that was the perfect segue for tomorrow. Would you like to introduce what we're talking about today?
Today, we're going to talk about that inner critic. And you have been pointing to the inner critic.
It's different than the inner calling.
It's different than the inner calling. The inner calling is there's something inside of you and you just know this is what you're to do next, or this is what you're to do. It may not be easy to explain and people may give you advice against it, but you just know.
The way we look at the inner calling is there's something in you that knows.
Now, the inner critic is what you were pointing us to yesterday, where you have had perfectionism going on in your life. And
boy, have I.
And it kept you stuck. And it kept you from showing up fully. And that's what happens with perfectionism. With one form of perfectionism, it can drive us to exhaustion. Another form of perfectionism also can keep us completely stuck. People will say to us, well, I'm not a perfectionist. My house is a mess and I haven't been able to keep a job and that sort of idea. But then when you talk to the person longer and you find out, well, why is your house a mess? Well, there's no way that I could ever have it the way I really want it, right? So this perfectionistic idea is the only way that it's right if it looks perfect. So then they get stuck and they do nothing. The inner critic has such power over how we show up in life. And that's why we started last month and we brought in that value statement as soon as we could. We have all the worth and all the value we're ever going to have simply because we exist. But when we have that inner critic showing up, it really does cloud our sense of purpose. We listen to it and it says, well, you're not doing that well enough. Oh, you can't do that. What will other people say? Oh,
have I done enough with my life?
Have I done enough with my life? That's why what you were talking about yesterday was such a beautiful example of how the inner critic shows up. The inner critic, in the most simplistic way to think about it, is fear.
That sums it up nicely.
Well, that's what it is. It's fear. Remember, there's love or there's fear.
The inner calling is love. The inner critic is fear.
And the only antidote to that fear is love and compassion. Because with love and compassion, when you look at our situation, let's take yours, Ada. Have I done enough with my life? That's fear. Compassion and love would say, you've always done the best that you could. You've always done the best that you could with the tools and the awareness that you had at the moment. So have you done enough with your life? Yes, you have. Because your life is your life. It's not going to look like anyone else's life. And who's to judge what is enough, what is more than enough, what is not enough? That's all that critic mess that we then carry around. And truly, the only way is to bring love and compassion, because that's just a fear-based thought. Perfectionism is just fear-based thought. I'm not enough unless I do things perfectly. Then it leads to those two forms, the person that's going to work themselves to exhaustion, or the person that's going to say, oh, it has to look this way. There's no way I could ever do it. And then they stay stuck. Same thing, perfectionism. But how do we get out of perfectionism? How do we get out of our inner critic? How do we get out of any fear-based thought? Bring in the antidote of love and compassion. When you say, well, how do I do that? How do I bring love and compassion?
I was literally thinking those exact words.
There's 4 ways to start with, but there's 4 ways, and they're concrete. So let's get started with the first one today, and then we'll finish it up next week. The first way is not to fight your inner critic. And we don't go into, oh, no, I shouldn't think this way, I shouldn't think this way, I shouldn't think this way. What we want to do first is to simply recognize your inner critic, because I would bet, Ada, that many of the times that you're saying to me, have I done enough with my life? You didn't recognize that as an inner critic.
I did not.
It was a habit that you were in. It was a fear-based thought. And so what we want to do first is to notice. We want to get to know it. So what tone does it have? How does it sound? How does it feel in your body? When we start that self-awareness process with our inner critic, we'll get to know it. You can't stop something that you don't know. You're going to start seeing, and that's what we'll do this weekend, start bringing awareness when I have a fear-based thought and I'm either diminishing my value, telling myself I have no value, something to do with my self-worth, that inner critic that's going to make us low. So what does it sound like? What does it feel like? Is there a pattern to it when I'm with certain people? Do I go into my inner critic? When I start thinking about certain subjects, maybe when I start thinking about the past, or when I start thinking about a certain relationship, or when I start thinking about a current challenge, is there a pattern to my inner critic? Because you can't change something that you don't know. So we're not going to fight it. We're going to bring awareness to it.
The one thing I want to point out with that, when we're not fighting it, we don't have to believe it. We don't have to agree with our inner critic. Our thoughts only have as much power as we give them. So if we have a thought and we believe a thought, then we start to give it that power. We give it that power. It doesn't have power by itself. So when I give power to the thought, have I done enough with my life, and I believe that thought, I'm the one who gave it that power.
Well, because what you probably do is you ask, have I done enough with my life? And typically how you say it is, when this is like classic hustle culture, when you hear about someone doing something
That's exactly right.
Isn't that right?
Yes.
I've noticed a pattern, right? So we're talking about patterns here. I've noticed a pattern with you. You will ask that question when you hear about someone who might be your age or younger or a little older, but typically around your age somewhere, where they're doing something significant. And we're all paying attention to them that day. They're in the news, or they're the community that we may be talking to and we may be in, oh, everyone's talking about this. Well, that's when you will say to me, have I done enough with my life?
Right. And I'm the one who gives that thought. I'm the one who gives that idea power.
Yes.
So when we're trying to recognize that inner critic without fighting it, what we're doing is we're listening to that voice of fear that's inside of us, but we're not giving it the power. We're not believing what it says. We're not falling prey to it. We're just listening to that voice. We're listening to the inner critic to recognize it for what it is. It's fear.
It's fear. It's not your identity. It's just a thought. When we have a thought, remember we always say, just because you have a thought doesn't mean that you have to believe that thought. But you have to recognize, first of all, that you're having this thought and it's fear-based.
So our intention for today and for this weekend is, I will recognize that my inner critic speaks from fear, not truth. I will not fight it. I will recognize it. I will recognize that my inner critic speaks from fear. It's not the truth. I will not fight it. I will recognize it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our day is better because you are part of our day. See you Monday.
See you then.